I'm sure those of you out there who are horror movie enthusiasts, or maybe you're more like me and you're a thriller guy, but every now and again, sometimes you'll find a project or some other factor, pertaining to a work in the horror space that you find your interest and the horror genre intersect, sporadically. But I'm sure most of you have noticed that this genre, in particular in its modern era, has quickly become dominated by Hollywood's longtime fetish for reboots, which, to be fair, does extend beyond the bounds of horror. But there are so many works coming out at this point, or it seems to be in the near future, that fit that type of vein. And the projects themselves vary in regard to their nature, the format they take, the stories they adapt. But, again, there's a lot of contrast in regard to specific releases between one another. And even in reception, some reboot projects fare well, others not so much. Again, a lot of variance. Halloween, I would say, is one of the more prolific, it's certainly not the only one, but one of the more prolific franchises to come out from, the reboot territory within Hollywood. And it's certainly, this has been the first time that it's gotten this type of treatment. I'm sure probably many Halloween fans can think back to the enormous amount of sequels, the total itself I forget, but the many that have been spawned off based on how, well accepted and historic the 1978 film is in regard to horror reverence. There's been this attempt over and over and over to, keep the Halloween story going. And it seems, while some films, again, fare well, maybe others have a bit of a cult following, others, again, offer a bit of a mixed vision. 2018 came along and Blumhouse was like, okay, let's reboot this franchise 40 years later on its 40th anniversary. It's like that, it's a pretty cool idea. And Blumhouse going in, I'd seen some of their projects, not everything. I haven't seen everything they've done in the horror field, but the projects I've liked have been very good. But, they're not immune as well, I would say, either to the reboot treatment in regard to bad projects. Black Christmas, you definitely come to mind. So you think about, Halloween 2018, you're like, okay, how will this fare? Right? Again, 40 years later, mixed reception on some of those former projects with Halloween when they tried to do reboots and sequels in the past. What does it look like now? And I would say generally from what I've seen, and this is just from my vantage point, the general reception, I've seen some mixed comments, but I would say more of the feedback leans in the positive direction, and that was my take. And the 1978 film, of course, is classic, and 2018 Halloween would not be a thing if it weren't for that movie. But I really loved Halloween 2018 on a first watch, and I've spoken to that before. It was a really strong horror release. The creative artistry for it, absolutely enthralled the entire time I first watched it. But even just, as a film in the Halloween context, as a sequel project, and how it treated the past. That final scene still gets me in regard to just how well structured it is in mimicking 1978 and just being like a beautiful homage. But then on top of that, how realistic Halloween was really surprised me. There's a lot of realism to the piece. I was taken aback by the story narration on Laurie Strode, which is really, I think, the point of the Halloween 2018 movie, was to demonstrate a character in a state of trauma 40 years later. It really was a very realistic portrayal, and I thought that dinner scene, too, always comes to mind when I think of Laurie Strode's performance, or Jamie Lee Curtis's, before I love her as an actress, but the way that she portrayed that character, again, in a state of trauma from Michael Myers, and what the horrible, presence that he is, what he had done to her, even just not being there in her trauma, I thought it was just so realistically conveyed. And even then, I spoke to this with Halloween Kills, right? Of course, my interest going into that movie highly leveled up, because again, I love 2018. I will say, to be fair, I'm not as much a slasher guy. So Halloween Kills, which leaned much more into that, and it wasn't a perfect movie, to be fair. I had some issues with it, but generally I thought it was a good continuation, much darker story, but very interesting. Again, I really feel that we're operating from a standpoint of strength here. But I do have a lot of interest in Halloween, notably because of the realism. I brought this up as well in a video. I think it was my second video covering Halloween Kills. I'll reference a specific video here in regard to the thumbnail, because I forget what it was to exactly. It might have been a teaser, but I referenced a local news story out of Washington State that at the time I was aware of, and it shocked me. I'm like, so do we now categorize Halloween as nonfiction? Because you looked at the journey between 1978 and 2018, and then the news story, not to treat it with any unnecessary levity, because it was a horrific story of what happened to this woman. But of course, I've referenced that as well for you if you want to read further into it. But it just shocked me again. Like, Halloween is an extremely realistic movie. Have a lot of respect for it, not only again on the storyline portrayal and the film itself and its craft, but also just how realistic it is unexpectedly. But it really impressed me. Again, I do think out of the reboot territory, Halloween has fared very well in the modern lens. Let's see, though, how this conclusion is going to end. Again, a lot of interest. And I will say it'd be interesting to see find what Hollywood does to fill in the Halloween void, right? Because Halloween, right, in terms of the releases, has always come out in October. It fit the holiday. Even if maybe the release schedule last year, and actually the previous couple of years was a bit unusual given, irrespective factors to the film. And this film had to release on streaming and in theaters at the same time. It still felt, like an interesting complement to the holiday, right? A perfectly fitting one. So it'll be interesting to see, going forward when this franchise ends with this final movie. Although never say never. I mean, Hollywood might come back years later, but let's try it again. Like Michael Myers Reborn. That's probably a plot, maybe to one of the early movies. I have no idea. Feel free to comment down below if I'm right. Or, if they try that, I'd like credit. Like, are we going to do this like 40 years later? Like, I proposed the idea all the way back that you were going to reboot something. Anyway, because it always happens. Let's see, though, how the conclusion is going to end. Again, I think the start in terms of the previous two Blumhouse films they've fared very well. And, of course, this is branching off a classic horror film. And I think in both pieces, the franchise itself is painted in a very reverent light to its original former picture, and it's definitely, I would say, one of the stronger rebooted series to come forward in the last couple of years. But let's see the conclusion. It's a first look anyway, first trailer. Here we go. I was wondering when this would come out, by the way, because it's like, when are they going to announce it? Time's ticking, closer to Halloween. They gotta ramp the marketing up at some point. And they did start really early, too, for kills. It's almost filmed like a found footage movie. Or like you're watching through Michael's mask. That'd be a creative angle if that's what they do in the film.
Come on, let's go. Come and get me, mother.
Well, it's going to be a gritty release, but after the previous couple pictures, did you really think you were getting anything different? Like I said, I'm much more a thriller person. So Halloween Kills was a much more violent picture. Again, I think Halloween 2018 was much more story-based and was much more character-driven than... it still had some violent moments, but it was much more story-focused, and I was like, okay, this is more along the lines of like thriller territory for me, though with Halloween Kills, it's like, yep, this is a bit of a more violent shift. But it makes sense. I mean, this is Halloween we're talking about. And it seems that's going to continue with this movie, although, again, I love the way that this is staged. Again, it fits the nature of the previous Hollywood movie, or Halloween films. It's very dark. Great set piece, by the way. I think this is the Michael Myers house, isn't it? Oh, no, it's not. The door's different. Maybe if our Halloween fans know where this house is, but it seems like a bit of a significant location the way that they filmed it. But, the way this starts off, I'm wondering if this is how they're going to stage the movie. Like the first 1978 movie. That'd be an interesting homage. Again, of walking through, because the opening moments, you see it through Michael's eyes. And this is almost the same thing, even though, again, the lens seems to be wider. If they were I guess it'd be a stronger signal if they had done a mask cutout. If they had shown it so that most of the image that you saw was through two eye holes. But... I think that was the way it was in the first movie. But still, loosely, I would say in that respect, references the former movie. But enough so that you can kind of see, again, the mimicry. I really feel that the way it's presented, it just has this very malevolent feeling and this eeriness and this ominous introduction that really befits the Halloween franchise at this point. And the film itself, again, looks really good as horror fare, and in the way they reference the former project. It's just been such a cool franchise to observe, even all these years later. Somebody who didn't grow up watching the Halloween movies and did so after Halloween 2018, largely because of the reception. I definitely stand by what I've said, and that it really is, I think, one of the stronger franchises to come out of Hollywood in the last couple of years that has gotten the reboot treatment. Looks great. it's gonna be like, again, a high-paced thriller. I imagine, it's gonna be mostly contained to Michael Myers and Laurie Strode. I think that's kind of where the story seems to be. Again, that what everybody expects. Like, okay, these two are going to face off. That was the ending of the first movie, or the Kills movie, that she's got the knife in hand to the hospital. Although, wasn't that like only in the alternate cut? That was kind of weird. Like, the way that they ended the movie, at least on the theatrical cut, I was like, why didn't you end it both ways? The same. It's kind of odd the way they staged it, but this is what's been teased. And it seems like a very good introduction. A bit of a shorter ad, which is fine. I'm looking forward to it when it comes out on October 14th. Okay, so it's a little earlier than Halloween again, but it gives you enough time to go and at least get prepared for the film. If your Halloween is busy, you can watch it earlier in the season. And the trailer acknowledges it's coming out, I guess, only in theaters? Maybe they just haven't added the streaming option yet. I'd be curious to see if they've 86'd that. Because, I mean, that's the way Halloween Kills released, with a streaming debut. Although, again, we don't oftentimes always know the numbers of how the films fare on streaming networks. And I do know that, Firestarter got the same treatment, but I know that film wasn't as well received. There's a reboot for you that didn't get as well received, but that one didn't get the adulation that Halloween has. But I don't know how Halloween Kills fared on streaming. I watched Halloween Kills on streaming. I didn't get a chance to watch it in theaters, but I'd be curious to see if that's how this gets released ultimately. It's only in theaters. And I'd imagine, well, no, because some studios are still doing, like a combined release model. The future, I'm sure, will be a little more clear on that. They don't say only in theaters, so there's at least an option left on the table. But it looks strong to me as a concluding chapter of Halloween. I think it looks great. I'm excited to see it when it comes out. I'm sure, many of you will say the same, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Maybe some of you out there are like, well, I like some of the other prequel or the previous sequel projects better to Halloween. Maybe the ones that aren't necessarily as or accepted as canon anymore in regard to the Blumhouse releases. But I'd be curious to hear however you feel in regard to the Halloween films and this concluding chapter down in the comment section if you feel so inclined. But I think it looks good, though. Strong concluding chapter. Again, I've loved the previous Blumhouse movies. And again, I feel that these films really do continue the legacy of Halloween of 1978 very fittingly. They're fun films to watch. Pretty violent at times, pretty dark, but still a good story overall and excellent development in regard to the film's craftsmanship. And again, the storylines. Halloween 2018 captivated me. Halloween Kills, maybe, to be fair, a bit less so. That was more so about like the more violent side, but it's still a bit of a general storyline and some themes in the movie that were pretty interesting to investigate. But I think Halloween Ends is going to be a very fitting conclusion. That seems to be, again, the driving force of the piece, that it is really about that Laurie Strode, Michael Myers ultimate conflict. And I think they definitely delivered on that based on the teaser. Maybe against some other character extensions and some other events that happened in the context of the story. But it generally looks really good. I'm very excited to see the end for Halloween. For now. Never say never with Hollywood, but for now, at least, it's the end. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.